Something. Okay. Oh, I probably don't have the microphone on, right? This little thing right here. Can't run the race if you don't get the, you hear the starting gun. And I heard this podcast, and a lot of the information that I'm going to bring to you tonight is things that I heard in it, and then I did some research on my own. And I put a lot of those things together, and this is what we have for you this evening. Well, it will help if I get everything in the right order. So, let's begin by doing that, Mark. Okay. On October 15th, in 2014, 5 prominent Houston ministers were given an order from the Houston City Council. They were asked to turn over any sermon materials, any emails, any text messages, anything that had to do with homosexuality or gender issues, and in the subpoena they were asked to do so or face going to jail. The background for this is there was an ordinance passed by the Houston City Council called HERO, which stands for Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. In that ordinance, passed by the City Council, it was an ordinance with a measure to protect Houston residents and visitors from discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. That's the important thing here, gender identity. It allowed men and women, one of the things on this ordinance that it would have allowed, men and women to interchangeably use the same public restrooms, locker rooms, showers, and changing facilities. You can imagine that the community rose up in opposition against this ordinance, and they developed a petition to have it revoked. And the city of Houston threw out the petitions. It resulted in a lawsuit. Where these 5 ministers come in is they weren't part of the lawsuit, but what they did, being ministers of 5 prominent congregations in the Houston community, is they encouraged their congregation to sign these petitions. And by doing so, they were ordered from the Houston city attorney to turn over all these things. This happened in what is known in the United States right in the middle of the Bible Belt, not even 2 years ago. If you were to Google this or look this up, you'll find a lot of information written on it. It has a good ending. They did get it thrown out. I'd like to tell you that this is an isolated incident, that everything has a happy ending, but it does not. It's not an isolated occurrence. In November of 2015, the fire chief in the city of Atlanta, I did a lot of research on this individual, and I've come to respect him a lot more than I ever did, from what I can read about him. His name is Kelvin Cochran. He's a fire chief in the city of Atlanta. He'd wanted to be a fireman since he was 5 years old. In 1981, he achieved that dream, and he went to work as a fireman in Shreveport, Louisiana. He rose from the ranks of the fire and became fire chief in 1999, and in 2010, he became a fire chief in the city of Atlanta. He didn't have that position long when he was called to work for the Obama administration as a fire administrator. And he did that for some time, and he was asked to come back from the city of Atlanta to assume his position as fire chief. I read an article about Mr. Cochran in the Wall Street Journal, which you can too, and it talked about how exemplary he was in his job, how they responded to fires faster than they did before, under his leadership. And he received many accolades and awards. This was in 2012 that I'm reading about. Mr. Cochran is a believer in Jesus Christ. And for his men's Bible study group, he wrote a book. And he published that book, and you can get it on Amazon. It's called Who Told You That You Were Naked? And in this book, he outlines what is biblical marriage and biblical values. That's where the problem came in. In 2014, the mayor read this book, or read parts of this book, and when you're going to write a book about what biblical marriage is, what are you going to put in it? What it is not. And when you do that, you're going to be speaking against something, and what we know now is no one wants to speak anything against sin, or this sin in particular. I read something in a book, well, I'll share that with you later, but anyway, he had a problem for what he wrote. And when the mayor saw this book, he put Mr. Cochran on suspension for 30 days. And I've done a little research about when something like this happens, when you have something that comes up that's against your convictions, against what you believe the Bible teaches in your workplace. They want to send you to remedial training to get your mind right so that you can accept everything that they want you to accept. Well, from what I understand, I don't know for sure, but I know Mr. Cochran must have not done what they wanted him to do, because on the 30th day they fired him. You can Google it and look him up now. He's in the process in a lawsuit of trying to get his job back. These are not isolated incidents. In Colorado Springs, Colorado, an Air Force cadet was not allowed to put a Bible verse on his whiteboard outside of his dorm room. It's not hard to look at these things and to realize that the culture that we live in, who used to be apathetic towards Christianity, is now turning not apathetic but antagonistic and hostile. I'm reading a book, and I got the title to this book from this podcast. It's called, and I think I told Bill about it, maybe some of you other people, it's called The Great Evangelical Recession. And in it, it has 6 factors that will crash the church in America and how to prepare. I was fascinated by the 2nd chapter. I remember as I started reading this, I could not put it down, because what I was reading, I realized that this is happening. I told my students in class, I said, your Christianity, and I remember telling Jared over the phone, your Christianity is going to be called into question far more than mine ever did, because of what you will grow up and what society will be like in the coming generations. I want to read to you in this 4 trends that this author of this book, his name is John S. Dickerson, sees. And he's a great researcher. He won a prestigious journalistic award from the city of Arizona. Awards that people like Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings have won, because he's so minute in his detail when he researches things. My mouth is incredibly dry, and I forgot to get some water, but I'll be all right. I'm okay. The host culture is changing faster than most of us realize, inside and outside of the church. That's number 1. The direction of the accelerated change includes anti-Christian reactionism and pro-homosexuality. Number 2. Number 3, the rate of the change toward this direction will further accelerate as the oldest 2 generations die. Listen to this. The rate of change toward this direction will further accelerate as the oldest 2 generations die and take their traditional American values and votes with them. And number 4, the changes will reach a point at which they directly affect church as we know it and life for the individual Christian. Maybe you haven't noticed these changes where we live, but we will. My question tonight is, how do we run this race that the Hebrew writer is asking us to run, and how do we keep on running and keep on running when everything is hostile toward us? How? In this book of Hebrews, if you were to research it, it's written to Hebrew Christians who are struggling with holding on to their Christianity, and they're leaving Judaism, and they're being persecuted for it. And they're being encouraged not to apostatize and not to leave Christ. And I'd like to tell you that what we're living in now, or I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg of what's coming. I think these 3 verses that we're going to study tonight, I think we can look to them and we can see that running the Christian race in such a hostile environment, in short, running the Christian race just got infinitely harder. Click, I remember. Well, how do we keep on running and keep on running and keep on running when these things are against us? As I said, the letter of Hebrews is written to encourage Christians in a time of trial. I want you to first notice that first word that we see in verse 12. Therefore, I did some research, and I know Bill, his sister's a grammatical expert. I know my wife and my daughter are grammatical experts, but I couldn't find out where. But the research I did on this word therefore, it seems to be written in such a way as, imagine this word therefore, that it was in big, bold letters, and somebody with a megaphone was saying, therefore! And what it means is, therefore is a connecting word, and it simply means just what follows is from what precedes. And what precedes from chapter 12 is chapter 11 in the heroes of faith. And the theme of these three verses is right there in verse 1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. We are in a race in this Christian life. And this race differs from most races. If I were in a race, in most races, I would be competing against everyone around me, and I would be running this race to cross the finish line and to get the prize. That's how most races are designed. This race is different than any other kind of race in two distinct ways, because we are not running against each other. I was thinking about this, and I thought, you know, I could probably beat Bill in a race. Right? I thought about that. I'm standing here and thinking, well, how can I bring this point out to him? I could probably beat Bill in a race, but then I thought about somebody like Weston. I'd have to tackle him. Because he's quick. But you see, what's great about the Christian race is we're not running against each other. We're not competing against each other. We're running with each other. Amen. And that's what's important here. And look at how Paul brings this out in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Paul brings this point out very poignantly and very beautifully. He says, read with me, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the course, I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, and I want you to know, focus back on, I have finished the course. That word course there, if you were to look it up in the Greek, is race. There is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, notice the language, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all of us who run, if we finish, who have loved his appearing. And because this is true, the Hebrew writer encourages us to run this race with endurance. That word is very key here. If you were to look at this word, you'll notice that there's aspects of this word in all three of those verses. The word endurance. You know, you don't endure something if it's easy. If you have to endure something, it's difficult. It's a struggle. That's why you have to endure it. I wrote here on my note, it's sort of like my students this morning. They had to endure my spelling. It was very bad. I wrote a word and I heard some giggling, and I looked up on the board and I realized that wasn't spelled right. So we began to have some banter and a spell check, and I eventually got it right. But in all seriousness, though, the Hebrew writer is encouraging us here that if we are going to run this race, we must run it with endurance. We must endure, and as I said, something that you endure is not going to be easy. It is going to be difficult, because we have a formidable foe in Satan. So we must endure. And the Jewish Christians here are encouraged, because the writer doesn't want them to go back into Judaism and leave Christ. Just as it wouldn't be good for us to do the same, to go back into the world and to leave Jesus. I want to give you an example. About 45,000 marathon runners will begin to start the Chicago Marathon each year. Thousands will not finish. Thousands will not finish. There's a point late in the race where the runners will tell you about the reality of the wall. It happens in about the 20-mile mark. Maybe Dale can help you a little bit with this, but in our bodies, stored in our liver and our skeletal muscles, is something called glycogen. Anybody ever heard of it? Glycogen is something that stores up energy. And in an average body, it can store about, I think if I read this right, 2,000 calories of glycogen per mile. You do the math. A marathon is 26-point-something miles. In about the 20-mile mark, a marathon runner is going to hit the wall. Have you ever watched someone cross the finish line in a marathon? It's some of the most things you can't not turn away. And what I mean by that is, have you ever seen somebody approaching it and it looks like their body cannot do what they want it to do? Think about the Ironman competitions. And it seems like they're trying to run and their body is depleted of every form of energy, but they keep on running. And they keep on running and they cross that finish line because they know how hard they work to get to there. And they keep on running and they keep on running, and you look at them and you wonder why. Well, we have to do that in our Christianity. When everything seems to be against us and we hit that wall, we have to keep on running and keep on running. Just as their legs will feel like lead, so will ours. And there's going to be times in this Christian life where we're going to want to quit. But we can't do that. That can happen in this Christian race when things get difficult. So, we need to take this command to run with endurance very seriously. One of the things that I want you to notice about these three verses, go back with me to verse 1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. I want you to notice that we cannot choose our race. It's the race that God sets. It's not the race that I set. It's not the race that you set, but it's the race that God sets. And our races will not be the same. They will be different in length. They will be different in sorrows and trials, but they will be different because each one of us is different. In our challenges and our sorrows, this race will be different. I can't run your race for you, and you can't run your race for me. And let me give you a good example about that. Parents, one of the most difficult things to do is to watch your children grow up. And I'm speaking from experience because it just happened. You know, for 20-some years, they're under your feet, and they're right there, and you're involved in their lives. And all of a sudden, you know, one gets married and one leaves home. And as I teach these kids downstairs and I watch these little kids, it doesn't matter how big they'll get. They're still your babies. They're still your kids. And to think that when they go away or they're living in the next town that you don't think about them or you don't worry about them, but there's a point in a parent where you want to control things. And you realize that you must give that up because you're not going to be able to prevent every pitfall that will come along in your child's life. But you want to, but you can't. And you know, we have to give ourselves, that's why I understand that we need to mold and shape ourselves as clay in the potter's hand. And when life gets the most difficult for me in this is when I don't want to let God shape me, I want to do the molding. But we can't do that. So we run this race and we run it with endurance. But how can we not only run, but how can we finish? Well, the Hebrew writer gives us three strategies that we have in finishing this race. He tells us how. And the first strategy is remember the heroes. Look back at chapter 12 and verse 1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance. Well, let's look at that. Since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, what that's talking about is to remember the heroes from chapter 11. And imagine this. I looked at several commentaries on this and several people's point of view. Imagine yourself in a Roman Colosseum and you have people in the crowd. You have Abraham and Moses and Isaac and Jacob and Paul. And they're going, go, 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 as you're running in this race. And as picturesque as that seems, that's not what's being said here. This is not them being witnesses of us, but them being witnesses to us. The emphasis is not on what they see in us, but what we see in them. It's their example. So, we need to bring them into mind. And not only, if you look at the language here, so great a cloud of witnesses, don't you think that that could also mean Christians who've lived before you, Christians who've been great examples in your life? I can think when I think about that, I think about my mother, and I don't tell her enough, but I think about the things that she did for me growing up, quietly, never saying anything, but the sacrifices she made to make sure that I had clothes on my back and food in my belly. And I think about my brother who took me in at the time when I was being most difficult. And he took me into his home. And then I think of an elder by the name of John Bogle who passed away, who took the time to give an 18-year-old kid the time of day. There are people that I remember, that I think about in running this race. And there are people that I know that sometimes I let them down, and I don't want to let them down. But I'm susceptible to Satan just like every one of you. He doesn't take a break with me. He works just as hard on me as he does you. But not only on those of chapter 11, but think about Christians that's lived before you and inspired you and keep on running this race. Because we have this great cloud of witnesses. So remember the heroes. The second strategy, drop the weights. This is so poignant. These three verses, I'm telling you. How many times have you heard this preached, Bill? A lot, right? There is a mouthful here. But it's something that you can picture. You ever seen anybody trained to run? You ever seen them wear ankle weights? I remember I wore them one time. Believe it or not, I used to run. I ran yesterday, as a matter of fact. I ran to Dunkin' Donuts, but that's not the same thing. But I remember one time I was running about 6 miles a night with a buddy in the military, and we decided we'd get these little ankle weights, and we got on it. Man, you take those things off and you feel like you can run like a gazelle. You know, because you feel so, the encumbrance, you don't have that anymore. And picture that when you see the Hebrew writer here. It says, cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us. Lay aside the weights. That word encumbrance there, if you were to look that up, means weight, mass, or bulk. Now this may be something evil or not something evil. Now this can be something that's just a weight to us, something that's weighing us down. I think about when I was in Little League. If any of you have ever played Little League, you know the hardball throwers, don't you? You know the fireballers on certain teams because you know that you're going to have to face them. And I remember I had one on my team. And in practice, I had to face him, and I was 10 years old, and my knees were knocking because, boy, could he throw fast. And how are you 12 years old and already be 6'1" and have chin hair? But he did. He did. I mean, he could throw, and you'd have that donut. You'd put 2 donuts on that bat, and you'd be swinging that bat, and as soon as you go to compete, though, you knock that bat down, you knock those donuts off because you got to be able to swing, and you got to be able to catch up to the fastball that he's going to throw you. That's what, picture that when you think about dropping the weights. Whatever it is in your life that's keeping you from running this race, and keep on running and keep on running, and getting to the finish line, drop it. Because it's hindering you. It will not help you. So we need to dump it. So, and as I said, it could be something evil and not something evil. And, you know, you might ask yourself, well, how do I know it's a weight? And I think all of us know that question because we can ask ourselves the question, is this something that is hindering my relationship with Jesus Christ? We can answer that truthfully. Most of us can do that. I know I can. I know what the weights are in my life, and I'm sure you know what the weights are in your life. You know what's hindering you or tripping you up. It's sort of like a manager of money. I'm sure they would say, you know, that's a bad stock, dump it. So get rid of it. Drop the weights. Now, the writer moves on to something evil. You know the word sin, if you were to look it up in this context here, I have a Strong's text, and the word sin, I love the definition of it. Missing the mark. Missing the mark. Failure. A wrong or an offense. And then it says, you might think this is just talking about a sin, but this is talking about, it's a definite article. What this means is sin in general. Where do we live? We live in a sin-filled world. We live in a sin-filled world, and the Bible tells us that we are of a sinful nature. So we need to realize this, that this is where we live. So it's going to be easy for us to get tangled up. It's almost like running a race with our shoelaces tied together. We're not going to be able to do that too well. You know, I'd like to tell you, if you're somebody who wants to protect your children or yourself from any evil in the world, I'm going to tell you how to do that. You put yourself in your house, you lock yourself in, and you never come out. You know, that sounds silly, right? But I guarantee you, when you walk out your door during the day, you're going to come across evil. This world, what we're trying to strive for is heaven. But in this world, who runs this world? Think about it. Satan. So we're always going to have to battle with evil while we're here. So we need to lay aside these things that will keep us from reaching the finish line. We need to get rid of those things. It's difficult to run a race with your shoelaces tied. Don't do it. But you know what? There's something that I know. The sin that trips me up is not the same one that trips you up. You know that? And you know what? Satan knows that sin that trips you up. There's no doubt about that. So, whatever it is, the end result is going to be the same. We're both going to fall on our face. So, whatever these weights are, drop them. Click. Third strategy. I don't think you can have the other two if you don't do the third, do you? I think that's kind of the third strategy, focus on Jesus. Look at this. You know, this first strategy is in the two strategies are in the first verse, but in verses 2 and 3, the last two, fixing our eyes on Jesus, verse 2, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured, there's that word again, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. We need to focus on Jesus. I love the word fixing here. If you were to look up this word fixing, I love the definition that it gives in Strong's. When I read this definition, I had to look at it because it really opened up the whole verse for me. It says to look away from all else. Wow. You ever look up words? Look away from all else. You know what that tells me? Whatever it is that's diverting your attention, as Dale said this morning, when something diverts your attention, it's going to throw you off your game. And whatever diverts your attention, get rid of it and focus on Jesus. Look away from all else. That's what these Christians are being encouraged to do, and we know that that's what we're being encouraged to do. God gives us this word also. So we need to focus on Jesus, fixing our eyes upon him. And as I said, the verb here indicates to intentionally move from one place to another. That's purposefulness. We are asked to focus on something. We were focused on something else. Now we must look away and focus and fix our eyes on Jesus. Why do we do this? So we don't get distracted. That's why we do. Why should we focus on Jesus? So we don't get distracted. The writer gives us three reasons. The first is Jesus' perfectly embodied faith. Let's look at these verses again. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith. Jesus ran this race perfectly. That's why we can look to him. He embodies faith. He's the founder or finisher. And all that means is the author and finisher. He's where everything begins and ends. Look at 1 Peter chapter 2. I found it interesting in coming to these lessons with Tom and Mario that they used some references that I will too. And one of them that they both used was 1 Peter chapter 2. Look at 1 Peter chapter 2. You know, when you get used to using a computer, you know, that was good advice, Dale, to get back to using the Scripture. My fingers don't want to work. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 21 through 23. 1 Peter 2, 21 through 23. For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps, who committed no sin, nor was any deceit found in his mouth. And while being reviled, he did not revile in return. While suffering, he uttered no threats, but kept entrusting himself to him who judges rightly. Jesus embodied faith. Consider him. Focus on him. And the second reason is he personally endured suffering. Jesus did that for you and me. That was a beautiful prayer that Alec worded this morning. And after studying the lesson, I realized when he talked about it, and I don't want to I'm just paraphrasing it. I don't know if I remember fully. But I remember him talking about, Jesus' perfection and how he didn't deserve anything that he took for us. Jesus willingly subjected himself to the humiliation of a cross. You ever see a depiction of Jesus dying on the cross? Most of the ones that you see will not be accurate, because the person that died on the cross didn't have any clothes on. They were naked. They were naked in front of the whole world to see. And they were affixed to a piece of wood out in the middle. They were a public spectacle. The Romans would not even kill their own citizens in that way, no matter how heinous their crime was. And the Lord of heaven, God the Son, died in that way on the cross. Do you think that we will have to endure anything as he did? Think about that. But what you and I will endure is nowhere near what Jesus did. Nothing was more shameful than the cross. And Jesus' cross was unlike the two thieves, because not only did he die the excruciating physical pain, but he took on my sin and your sin. That's when the prayer hit me. You know what? He who was not polluted became polluted for me. That's powerful. He who knew no sin. Look at 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. That's why we look to him. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, look at verse 21. He made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. While the physical pain was excruciating, can you imagine hanging there for all the world's sin? Why did he do that? For the joy set before him. Jesus told his disciples that he had work to do while it was day. The night was coming when he would not be able to work. He knew what he had to do, and he knew why he had to do it. And he knew the joy that it would bring in redeeming us from our sins. And now, I think Jesse mentioned this this morning. He had in his prayer something about being seated on the right hand of God. You know where Jesus is at now? When you look at these three verses, he's in a position to help you and me run this race. It says, notice this, fixing our eyes on Jesus, verse 2, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured. Why do I endure, God? Why do you cause painful things to happen in my life? Because of the joy. I have to tell you, I love my class. I haven't been teaching the kids in such a long time, and I got a group that I haven't taught. I always taught Jared's age or Bethany's age. And I tried to get across to them, and I asked them tonight to think about some of the things that I'm going to speak about. And I told them that it was important to me. I mean this from the bottom of my heart, and it's my opinion, but I believe Christianity for the generations coming up will be far different than it is now. I think we've only started to see things that are happening in the world in which we live that is turning antagonistic towards us. And I think these 3 verses are so important and will be so important in our lives. And I'm not trying to scare anyone, but you know what? Get on the computer. Google things that's happened to people just because they were, and I'm not talking about in third world countries. It's atrocious there. I talked to a guy that he's dumping fuel in the fuel tank out where I work, and he's from Europe. He said Christians are being slaughtered over there. He knows his family lives there. But you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I'm going to tell you something that I think. I think that generation will be stronger than us. One of the points that in the book that I'm reading about the great evangelical recession, when it talked about the 2 older generations dying off, taking their traditional American values and votes with them, we might pat ourselves on the back. We are of those generations. Let me tell you something. Those generations failed. The church is dying at an alarming rate. We're not saving our children. As much as we want to pat ourselves on the back, this past generation, where are the children of those generations? So what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to pass blame, but what I'm saying is somewhere along the line we have to learn from our mistakes. Whatever we have to do to save our kids, we need to do it. And you know what? And Dale, you did step on some toes, but you were right on today about one thing I really hit me. Do you think Susie and Johnny and little Billy and little Sarah are going to grow up and serve God when their parents' devotion is everywhere else? When they're not into it? They're not. That's not saying that you can do everything. You can do everything right and it still turn out. I realize that. But I'm saying it for the most part. We have to train our children. That's our job. That's the job that God gives us. I'm going off a little bit, so just something that I noticed about that, to where we might want to pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, look what this happened, look what this happened. And, well, something went wrong there. But anyway, I digress. Jesus perfectly embodied faith. He perfectly endured suffering. And finally, the third reason is he is in a position to come to our aid. Notice Hebrews chapter 1, and then we'll get to the conclusion. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 3. Beautiful verse. I have in my Bible written in just the open space here. I must have written this in an earlier time. If I want to see God, I know where to look. Read this verse with me. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he did the work that God gave him to do. He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. And that's where he is. That's a beautiful picture. I would like to conclude tonight by introducing you to a man by the name of John Stephen Akawari. Any of you know who he is? Got any idea? I didn't. I looked him up. I heard about him. Sometimes you hear about things and you wonder, is somebody just trying to make something, a story more poignant? John Stephen Akawari is a marathon runner. He ran in the 1968 Summer Olympics in Mexico City. He ran the marathon. 75 runners began that marathon. 57 finished. He finished last. Let me read to you why. While competing in the marathon in Mexico City, Mr. Akawari cramped up due to the high altitude of the city. He had not trained at such an altitude back in his country. At the 19-kilometer point, I had to look this up. Here I was in my little Google, kilometers to miles. I wanted to know how far he was. At the 11.81 mile mark, Mr. Akawari while they were jockeying for position and he cramped up, he was hit. And in that hit, he broke a bone in his leg. And he fell to the pavement and he hit his shoulder. And he got up and he kept on running. He kept on running. He continued running and he finished last among the 57 competitors. And the winner of the marathon, Mama Wold of Ethiopia, finished in 2 hours, 20 minutes, and 26 seconds. Mr. Akawari finished the marathon in 3 hours, 25 minutes, and 27 seconds. 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 1 second after the winner, when there were only a few thousand people left in the stadium, and the sun had set. A television crew was sent out from the medal ceremony when word was received that there was one more runner about to finish. And as he finally crossed the finish line, a cheer came from the crowd. And when Mr. Akawari was interviewed later, they asked him, "Why did you keep on running? Why? You had broken your leg." You know what he said? "My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start the race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish the race." That is powerful. And I thought about that when I read that. And I think about Jesus naked and humiliated, hanging on a tree. How can I quit the race? Why? What's worth it? I think about loved ones that's come back into my life. What is worth you giving up heaven? Nothing. Nothing is worth it. I don't care what you think it is. It's not worth it. It's not. This man I have an immense amount of respect for. He ran in a lot of other races. But I sure love what he said there. I'd like to ask you, how can you stop running? Why would you want to? Think about these 3 verses tonight. Think about them and ask yourself, am I running the race that God wants me to run? Am I running the race that I want to set, or am I running the race that God has set for me? I ask you that, and if you've been running this race and you've got off the course and something stripped you up, make it right while you have time and opportunity while we stand.